Thank you all for being here. My name is Julie Harris. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Bicycling Alliance. I'm pleased to have our friend and fellow cyclist, Chief Blymeister, here with us today from the Lincoln Police Department, along with several members of the Nebraska Bicycling Alliance Board and several local cyclists from here in Lincoln. We have several organizations represented here. We have Bicycle Lincoln here, Great Plains Bicycle Club, and others. And I want to thank Susan Rodenberg for her help with the logistics today, and Derek Augustine for helping us with our Facebook Live. It takes a village. The Nebraska Bicycling Alliance is the state bicycling advocacy organization. Our mission is to cultivate a more bicycle-friendly state through partnerships, education, and advocacy. This past week has been a very difficult week for the bicycling community in Lincoln. On September 23rd, Randy Gibson, riding south of Lincoln, was struck and killed in a crash by a person reportedly under the influence who was driving a car. On September 21st, Joe Billisbach was riding in the protected bike lane on N Street here in Lincoln, struck and severely injured in a crash by a person driving a car, again, reportedly under the influence. Lincoln is not alone, unfortunately, with this recent surge in crashes involving people on bikes. On September 13th, a 14-year-old child in Omaha was the victim of a hit and run while riding their bicycle on a neighborhood street. On August 23rd, a 68-year-old man in Scottsbluff, despite the fact that he had 5 red blinking lights on his bicycle and on his person, was struck by a person driving a car. Tragically, Nebraska has suffered the loss of 2 children this year as a result of crashes. Jalen Duncan, 8 years old, was struck and killed by a person driving on August 21st in Omaha. And Peyton Fife, 10 years old, died June 20th in McCook, again having been struck by a person driving a car. We would be here all day if I listed all of the near misses and harassment that the people on bikes around here experience regularly. We're frustrated. Many people in this room are heartbroken. They've lost their friend, they've lost their coworker, they've lost their family member. Instead of standing here discussing deaths and injuries, we really should be here celebrating the outstanding work being done by our friends in Bicycle Lincoln, the local advocacy organization, to educate and encourage people to bike in Lincoln. In fact, here's some breaking news for you all. Thanks to them and others like the Great Plains Bicycle Club and Bike UNL, Lincoln is on the brink of being the back-to-back national champion in the National Bike Challenge. I want to take a moment to emphasize the language I'm using today because it's very important. You'll notice that I'm saying crash, not accident. You'll notice that I'm saying a person on a bike and a person driving a car. Words matter. Accuracy matters. These are not accidents caused by cars. They are crashes that have left behind a trail of devastated families and friends with injuries to deal with and to pay for. People on bikes have the legal right to ride on most Nebraska streets and roads. Many do so by choice, for recreation or transportation, or to improve their health. Many of our fellow Nebraskans, however, ride out of necessity without access to a car. Regardless, a person on a bike is no different than a person in a car. These people are our neighbors, our coworkers, our classmates, our family members. The people driving the car and the people riding the bike all want to get to their destination safely and efficiently. Both have families and friends and classmates that love them. Unfortunately, for people that bike, our streets and roads sometimes feel like an us versus them environment, which is unnecessary and frankly contributes to an unsafe environment for everyone. So today we would like to remind all Nebraskans to be very intentional about safety on our streets and roads, because we all depend on it. Don't drive under the influence. Don't text and drive. Obey the speed limit. Be mindful of our most vulnerable road users, those biking and walking, especially in parking lots, in neighborhoods, and around schools. Remember that the 5 or 10 seconds that you may have to wait to safely pass a person on a bicycle is a very small price to pay for everyone's safety on our roads. I'd like to invite Chief Blymeister up to say a few words. We are very fortunate to enjoy an excellent working relationship with the Chief, and I know he has a few things to say. So here's Chief Blymeister.
Julie, thank you for the opportunity to be in front of you here today. And as you heard Julie say, there's many different things that we can all do to take ownership in our own safety and security. In preparation for today's event, I asked some of our talented staff to do a little bit of research as it relates exclusively to the city of Lincoln and involving crashes between bikes and cars. And since 2012, we have witnessed somewhat of a decline in the overall number of incidents. However, to date this year we have 97 too many. And many, if not most, can be prevented by accountability on the part of the driver and accountability on the part of the rider. And I'm just here to say, as a cyclist and also as the chief of police, that we're committed to the safety and security of all people on our motoring, on the streets and on the sidewalks and on the trails. And collectively, I think that we can hopefully in the future prevent some of these tragic incidents that have made headlines recently.
Those are our prepared remarks. We're happy to answer any questions you might have. Yeah.
Can we get some more police enforcement on that N Street? I've ridden 8,000 miles in the last 2 years, and I've only seen one officer on the bike down there. It's both pedestrians and bicycles and the cars. There all needs some enforcement down there.
You're talking about the in-street bike lanes, is that correct, sir? Okay. And again, I think that that's an excellent addition to the safety and security of our community. I truly do, that our partners at Public Works, and I'm not sure, I don't see anybody here today from Public Works. Can we get more enforcement? Candidly, we make our officers aware. We put them in the places that they need to be. There's increasing emphasis at different points in time, but we cannot be at all places at all times. We're a really small police force in comparison to a population of 280,000 people. But you have my assurances that we continue to have these conversations internally, and it is a point of emphasis, not just for motorists, traffic law enforcement, but also for the enforcement of the rules and regulations that pertain to cyclists. So,
Josh?
You said you ran stats on crashes between bikes and cars. Do you have numbers on who's actually at fault versus more cyclists at fault or more cars at fault?
that's a great question. Your first name was Josh? Josh. I did not have that. These were very rudimentary numbers that we pulled together quickly for this. But if we'll talk afterwards, I'll get your contact information and I can relay that out. It might take us a couple days to try to parse all that information out.
You said the numbers were down. How much are they down?
Well, to date, and again, we're going on an annual basis. To date, it's 97. In 2012, we saw the highest, which was at 176. If we extrapolate out the 97, we're on pace for approximately 132 crashes this year.
Can somebody comment on the status of state law concerning cyclists? Is it adequate? Is it inadequate? Inadequate. What else would you like to see?
I think both of us can talk about that a little bit. Josh brought up an important point, and oftentimes there's going to be some of these crashes that are the fault of motorists, some that of the cyclists. But here's the important component, and we have worked hard to get legislation that puts things on a more equitable playing field. But when a cyclist is struck by a motor vehicle, that leads directly to injury and at times death. And that's really what we're trying to prevent from happening, is the injury and the death. And no amount of legislation is going to prevent that from happening. The educational components, the proactive enforcement hopefully will, but by the time we get to a traffic crash, it's oftentimes too late to prevent the injury or death.
And I would, thank you, Chief Blymeister. I would add to that the way we build our cities and the way we build our streets is very important to make sure that they are built to be safe for all users of the roads, not just people who drive. So in addition to the education that the chief just mentioned, we also need to make sure that we are looking long-term to make sure we're building things that are safe for all users.
You're not advocating for signage or protection they have bill in the legislature compromise?
It depends on the specifics on that. So some signage has been shown to actually be hurtful rather than helpful. Some signage has been shown to do good things for people on bikes. So it just sort of depends, but I think a lot of it is not necessarily legislative. And I know the City of Lincoln has been a great partner. Planning department is here. They've done a great job in terms of their long-range planning and looking at where they can make Lincoln more safe for people on bikes and people walking. Certainly the N Street protected bike lane is the standard that we are looking for, a protected area for people. But again, that won't always, there are people that make very bad choices, whether driving under the influence or driving and texting, that all of the barriers in the world are not gonna help us there. So it's a combination of all of those things. It's legislative, it's education, it's infrastructure.
Julie, can you go into a little bit more detail about how the Nebraska Bicycle Alliance works with the city to make at least city bike lanes safe?
Well, the city has great advocates that are already doing that work. I mentioned Bicycle Lincoln, I mentioned Bike UNL. The city has a pedestrian bike advisory committee that does really great work. So us as a state advocacy organization, we're lucky that we can let those local groups do all of that great work, and they are doing great work. And then when they find things that they're running up against that might need a state level solution or might need an extra voice at the table to raise awareness, we're happy to step in and do that. So it's a nice pairing, but definitely the folks here in Lincoln are doing an amazing job, and we're just cheering them on all the way.
Do you know if there's any study of what's happening in other cities, any models doing studying in other cities, either by the police department or by these groups that are working with us now? And for this problem and others that
Well, there are several large cities in the country that have adopted a policy called Vision Zero. And what that does is that the city makes a firm commitment to reduce the number of deaths on the roads to zero. And that's a very big goal. But Los Angeles, New York, Seattle, lots of cities have done this, and they're being very intentional about the work they do. It might take some work from law enforcement and some work from city government and work from advocates and others to come together, for folks that work with disadvantaged populations to come together and see what we can do to get that goal to zero deaths on our roads. So that's something that's happened nationally, and I think that's it's starting to sort of trickle down to smaller cities like Lincoln and Omaha, so it's possible that something like that could be here in the future. Edie?
You might want to add something about the bike walk conference that you just said.
We held our inaugural Nebraska Bike Walk Summit this past March here in Lincoln. We'll be holding the next one in Kearney in March, and we're hoping to get some more outstate and western Nebraska, central Nebraska folks to the table there, and hoping that we can call on the great advocates from Lincoln and Omaha to come and sort of peer mentor some of the other smaller towns that are looking to make things better for themselves there. Andrew?
How much, I understand that some of these bikers that are really experienced bikers, how much does that jar your confidence, about safety out on the roadway?
Well, of all of the people that rode here today or that are here from the cycling community, I would say we are all reeling. This does definitely shake our confidence, but a lot of these folks have been riding for a very long time and are going to continue to get out there and lead by example and continue to work to make things better. And so I think today we just need to all take a deep breath and go through all those feelings that we're feeling with all of our friends that have been hit or killed and keep working hard. And I don't think there's anyone in this room that I see that isn't ready to do that.
I had a question primarily for Mr. First of all, I want to say I really appreciate the job that you and Lancaster County have done taking these incidents very seriously. It's something we don't see in other cities, so I really appreciate that. But as someone who's read a lot of so-called accident reports, one theme that comes up frequently is that the officer often uncritically takes the motorist at their word. And things like in Randy's death, you know, he came out of nowhere, but you see that repeated a lot in accident reports where motorists reported that the cyclist came out of nowhere, and that's the end of the accident. What training is happening internally or is available to the officers to help get cyclists on a little more even footing when a collision does happen?
Your first name, sir?
Chris.
Chris, great question. And oftentimes what you're seeing, I imagine that you're looking at the public version of an accident report, right? And the narrative that corresponds with the diagram. There are, in circumstances such as the events that we're talking about today, other investigative reports, much more detailed, that are not publicly available. Now, the semantics, the words, as Julie mentioned earlier, they do matter. And there has to be an awareness. What we're tasked with is reporting the incident as described to us by witness accounts, by the physical evidence that we're going to see. And we will and do, as evidenced by some of these, hold people accountable when the charges are appropriate. That's something that we struggle with, that we teach all the time, not only in accident reports, but in all sorts of different investigations, from domestic violence to a disturbance or mental health calls. And I'm glad that you brought it up, and something that we can continue to emphasize, similar to the increased enforcement that this gentleman over here had asked about.
And I could add to that too. The crash I referenced out in Scotts Bluff, Ace Backer was the man that was hit with the 5 blinking lights. And the initial report taken by the State Patrol, the only citation that was issued there was for an expired registration. And so Nebraska Bicycling Alliance contacted the State Patrol, the county attorney, and said, hey, we have a 3-foot passing law in Nebraska. Clearly, this person driving did not give 3 feet of clearance. And after the fact, the State Patrol was able to turn that additional information over to the county assistant county attorney, and they did issue a citation for failure to give 3 feet of passing. So it's definitely a partnership, and it's a learning. You know, a lot of these laws are fairly new, and we recognize that law enforcement officers have like 800 and some things they have to remember every time they encounter somebody or a situation. So we at the same time, we are very, we want to make sure that everyone understands what the laws are, but we do understand also that there are, sometimes mistakes happen, but in this case in Scotts Bluff, we were able to make it right.
And that's a great comment. And I know that the leadership in the law enforcement entities are welcome to have those conversations. So bring them forward. We'll talk about them. We may disagree at some particular points, but as you referenced, there's 97 crashes so far this year in the city of Lincoln. We work and investigate over 9,000 every single year. So this is a very, very small percentage. Unfortunately, because of the mechanisms that are involved and the speeds, they're always leading to injury or sometimes death. So,
How many fatal crashes between motor vehicles and bikes in the city this year?
I don't know the answer to that, Riley. I don't think that they're, this year,
3 in the state.
I don't think there's any in the city of
But
Lincoln
in the city of Lincoln that I
this
know
year.
of.
Yep.
Are there any initiatives to basically just add more shoulders to roads that are having traffic on bikes? Both the county initiatives and the state initiatives, because I live on the highway, it is highly traveled by bikes for years. No shoulder.
The question is, can we get more shoulders on our roads? We partner with the Nebraska Department of Transportation. We've started to develop a very nice working relationship with them. That will be an ongoing conversation and dialogue with them about what our roads need to make them safe for all users. Certainly there's a lot of engineering and a lot of math that goes into all of that, and we're working as hard as we can with NDOT to make sure that they don't have built-in assumptions about things that may, lead to roads that may not be safe for people biking. So we're pleased that the work that we're doing with NDOT has been very productive, and we anticipate that continuing.
Okay.
Well, thank you all very much for being here today. If you have other questions, don't hesitate to let me know, or we can help you in any other way. Thank you very much.